Until this joint project with Nintendo was ultimately killed, Sony never had an intention of entering the video game market.
And I ended up winning it. And you want to hear the ridiculous price?
Okay.
$75.
$75.
$75.
Sounds like coffee shop music.
Oh my god.
Give me a break.
It turns on.
The story of the Nintendo PlayStation prototype is remarkable. One of the biggest what-ifs in gaming, it's easily one of the most interesting and controversial tales in the entirety of the retro gaming landscape. It includes very public backstabbing between two massive Japanese corporations, but evolved into so much more. Key members of the international retro gaming community worked together and contributed to the unit becoming functional again. All the while, it travelled the world so many could experience it hands-on. To label it as an internet sensation would be unfair. It's so much more. We're lucky this was found and can be celebrated. It's a pivotal part of gaming history, which is why it's a wonder of the retro gaming world. So, how did two of the now biggest gaming manufacturers and modern rivals decide to pair up for a combined project in the first place? Well, the story begins at Sony rather than Nintendo. Ken Kutaragi had been working for Sony and their digital research lab since the mid-70s. His earlier work with the company involved LCDs and digital cameras, projects that earned him an honourable reputation for engineering and problem solving. One day, he was observing how much fun his daughter was having playing a Nintendo Famicom. Noting the potential of video games, he wished to be involved in the up-and-coming industry. However, the business philosophy that Sony had at the time presented a roadblock. Sony and its executives were not interested in gaming. They saw it as a fad and likened it to toys. They wished to uphold a more adult audience with their products. They were the ones with expendable incomes after all. Undeterred, Kutaragi started a project with Nintendo in secrecy. I'm not exactly sure how such a scenario goes down. I guess there is a lot about Japanese corporate culture I don't understand, but this partnership resulted in the SPC700 chip, the primary audio driver for the Super Nintendo. As you can imagine, this is an incredibly important portion of the console. And as you can probably also imagine, this made Kutaraga's superiors furious. He was quite low down the corporate ladder at the time, and such an endeavour goes against the grain of Japanese corporate culture. But fortunately for him, his career was kept intact thanks to the then CEO, Norio Oga. The story of Oga is interesting in itself. Originally an opera singer, he gained the attention of Sony executives by writing a scathing letter about the quality of their tape recorders. Impressed by his insight, they hired him as a consultant, and he climbed through the ranks from there. Both Oga and Kutaragi are considered enigmas in Japanese corporate culture, which is why Oga had Kutaragi's back when his forbidden deal with Nintendo came to light. Because of that, you'll find a substantial portion of Sony in each Super Nintendo. It's for that reason that Sony and Kutaragi were an obvious choice when Nintendo decided to create a CD-ROM add-on for the SNES. Again, there are those in Sony who were not pleased with the project, but Kutaragi again had the blessing of Oga. The partnership began in 1988 and will be split into two projects. An add-on for the SNES akin to the Sega CD, called the Super NES CD-ROM system, or SNES CD for short, and a combination unit which was to be named the PlayStation, and that's with two words. Both will be using Sony's Super Disc format, and it's believed that 200 prototype units were manufactured at the time. The project presumably sailed on smoothly for several years until 1991. The add-on and combination unit were to be unveiled at the summer CES in Chicago, with both Nintendo and Sony presenting different announcements. Sony did just that, but the next day, Nintendo's following actions went down in gaming history. They surprised everyone with an announcement that they would instead be partnering with Philips, one of Sony's biggest competitors. This was shocking at the time, but no less so than to Sony and Kutaragi. The question though was, why? Why assail the partnership with Nintendo so suddenly and publicly? Nintendo's official line, from Howard Lincoln to the press, was as follows. Our engineers reached the conclusion that from a technical standpoint, it was better for Nintendo to work with Philips. The reasoning of course goes much deeper. You see, Hiroshi Yamauchi, who was the president of Nintendo at the time, had grown quite wary of Sony. Since these projects were using Sony's own disc format, Sony would have much more control over the medium and software licensing than Nintendo. And Nintendo losing control is very un-Nintendo-like. Yamauchi was already displeased with the Sony chip in his Super Nintendo. Not only was Sony the sole supplier of the chip, which effectively meant they could charge whatever price they wished, but developers were also required to pay for a pricey development tool directly from Sony. In secret, before the CES announcement, Yamauchi sent both Lincoln and his son-in-law, Minoru Arakawa, who was the president of Nintendo of America, to Europe to hash out a more favourable deal with Philips. This whole scheme was seen as a massive betrayal in the Japanese business world. It's very uncommon for one Japanese company to screw over another in such a way, but the fact that it was for a European company made it all the more outrageous. A lot of entities saw Nintendo in a very different light after that CES. Still, Sony attempted to save the projects, and by 1992, a new deal was formed where Sony could produce SNES-compatible hardware. It wasn't very fruitful for Sony, however, with all software licensing instead retained by Nintendo. It's no secret that console manufacturers usually make a loss on hardware, but make it up with the software, so the deal was effectively pointless for Sony. Suffice to say, Nintendo created a powerful competitor that day. A year later, Sony dropped the deal, and after some brief legal wrangling in the courtroom, retained the name PlayStation. This time, just one word. With that, Sony would go on to develop and release the original PlayStation, one of the most groundbreaking consoles of the 1990s. Even though they started in a small position in the gaming world, they quickly grew humongous. They enacted policies that steamrolled Nintendo, like capitalizing on the industry-wide move from 2D to 3D, and treating the developers much better. They also targeted a more adult audience, as was their business philosophy before gaming, who, as a whole, had much fatter wallets than the average 8-year-old playing Mario Kart. In short, Sony turned its public humiliation around with a vengeance and was incredibly successful because of it. I sure do hope Nintendo felt a bit silly, even if they will never admit it. Sony has outperformed them ever since. This would be the end of the story until 2015.
I'm going to be the last person to ever play this at a con, most likely. And then I'm terrible because I'm playing with one hand, but I did it. I played with it. I can't do this with one hand and film. But I'm also going to be the one disconnecting it and putting it away.
Well, it actually resumed in 2009, several years before the prototype went public. Meet Terry Diebold. He was an employee of Advanta, which was a bank going through, well, bankruptcy. He was tasked with packing up the contents of his office so everything could be sold off at auction. During this process, he personally packed several boxes of nice kitchenware and decided to bid on it himself. He won that, but for some reason, he also won a pile of other boxes he wasn't anticipating. There was so much stuff that it took 2 carloads just to get it all home. Within one of those boxes was the fabled subject of this video. The total price he paid for it all at auction, including the prototype, just $75. Mind-blowing when looking back in retrospect. But how does an ultra-rare prototype end up at a failed bank? The answer is a man named Olof Olofsson. Born in Iceland, Olofsson was the founder of Sony Computer Entertainment and was paramount in the creation of the original PlayStation along with Kutaragi. He later moved on from Sony, however, and joined the board of directors at Advanta in 1997. He left in 1999 though, and evidently left all his junk there too. This is how it ended up in an auction lot when they were clearing house. It appears Diebold didn't really know what it was, so on it lived in his attic. Luckily, he's like me and never throws anything away. The prototype existed upstairs until July 2015, when Terry's son, Dan, was browsing Reddit and saw a post about the Nintendo and Sony CES debacle. He left a comment claiming his dad had one in storage, and as you can imagine, it being Reddit and all, no one believed him. Eventually, he posted a video on YouTube showing off the prototype, and that was that. A confirmed prototype of the Nintendo PlayStation now existed. The video itself currently has over 1.3 million views. Let's take a tour of the prototype. Resembling the essence of a Super Nintendo, it's instead branded with the Sony logo. A cartridge loader is at the rear, although this accepts SNES cartridges in their typical design that's found in Japan and PAL-land. There was a cartridge with the console, and this needs to be inserted for the console to boot into CD-ROM mode, sort of like the boot disc for a GameCube's Game Boy player. Without this cartridge, the console is just a standard SNES and will play its entire library of games. At the front, there are 2 controller ports. Again, these are the same as what's found on a SNES, and the standard controllers will work. There was a special version of the standard controller, also found with the console however. This has the Sony and PlayStation logos on it instead of Nintendo. Also at the front is a dual-speed CD drive, which is the front-loading tray type. Notably, the console can also play audio CDs, which are controlled using an array of media function buttons on the top of the console. There's even a small LCD that shows the track number and other CD things. Around the back, there's a power jack and a proprietary AV socket that's the same found on the SNES, GameCube, and N64. Additionally, there's a choice of straight composite, RF, and even S-video. Next to those, there's another proprietary socket labelled Next. No one is entirely sure what this is for, but it's likely for debugging. Unfortunately, the unit was in incomplete working order. The Diabolds didn't initially want to power it on, fearing it might be damaged, but they were invited to the Retro HK Gaming Expo in Hong Kong, where someone could give it a look. This would be the first of many international trips for the prototype. There, with the assistance of Restart Workshop's technician, Daniel Cheung, it was powered on for the first time in many years. Although, unfortunately, it wasn't in a fully functional state. It booted up and played SNES cartridges, there was no audio, and the CD drive didn't function at all. From there, it was for some reason X-rayed, just to make sure it wasn't booby-trapped by Nintendo I guess, and after confirming it was safe to open, Cheung attempted repairs. He was unsuccessful, but did confirm that the CD drive was receiving power. So, who to repair it? Well, the one, the only, Ben Heck. I couldn't think of a more fitting choice personally. Back when he was in cahoots with Element 14, he ran a weekly show until 2018, aptly called the Ben Heck Show. Throughout these videos between 2016 and 2017, Heck and Dawn does what Heck and Dawn does best and fully restored the system. Find those videos linked below, they're fascinating and well worth a watch. And yes, the repair was a success, partly due to capacitor replacement. Should be expected really. By this point, Nintendo PlayStation fever was gripping the retro gaming world. Retro Collect was anonymously sent the boot ROM for the console, showing that there was at least some people out there with previous knowledge of the prototypes and still in possession of relevant materials. From this, compatible games were even homebrewed. One such example is Super Boss Gaiden, developed by the German duo Chrono Mugli and Dieter Lazar. The plot is fantastically relevant. A fictional version of Sony's president is informed by his executives that a prototype has been found and emulated. Infuriated, the president takes the problem into his own hands, literally by kicking ass to recover it. This can be downloaded and played through a regular SNES emulator, but is compatible with the prototype if burnt to CD. Additionally, the boot ROM is readily available for download. Links can be found in the description. From there, the prototype travelled the world. It appeared at many expos and conventions over the next few years, always accompanied by Terry Diebold. Fortunately for everyone that visited it, Diebold employed a very hands-on approach for those interested. Many actually got to play the prototype, and seemingly were allowed to pick it up and even inspect it. This certainly would not be expected for such a valuable prototype, but it showed Diebold was keen to share the experience of the one-of-a-kind object. It visited many places around the world over the next few years, but by 2020, Diebold was ready to sell. Many had sent him offers since his discovery, so it's great to see he was able to resist the temptation of an instant six-figure payout for so long. I don't think I would have lasted 5 years. The prototype went up for auction, and unsurprisingly, sold for a mega sum. $360,000 to be precise, which included a buyer's premium. The Moneybags identity who had purchased the console stayed anonymous for a while, but is eventually revealed to be a man named Greg McLemore. Mick Lemore made his money in real estate and the early internet, most notably founding the website pets.com. Amazon would buy a 50% share of the website in 1999, just in case you're wondering about the sort of money involved. Mick Lemore is a massive collector of gaming-related items. His collection ranges from strength testing machines from the 19th century to the game computer space from 1971, which very well could be its own episode. He had this to say to Forbes: "I'm interested in sharing my passion for gaming. One of my areas of focus is the evolution of gaming, including how earlier arcade games inspired video games, and how early video games influenced later innovation. I believe the Nintendo PlayStation fits in well with this focus." So, what to do with a room full of that kind of stuff? Start a museum, of course. At least that's what he was quoted as saying back in 2020. I know events have gone down over these last few years, but I'm yet to see any progress updates on a permanent installation. He is heavily involved with an online resource called Museum of the Game, however, which claims to be the biggest of its kind on the internet. So, at least we know his heart's in it. Hopefully we'll see something tangible soon. That's the current state of the prototype. But guess what eventuated between the bastardized contract between Nintendo and Philips? Yep, the CDI. Geez, Nintendo really did not come out on top with their decision making. But it serves them right. Specifically, a run of now infamous Nintendo properties appeared on the system, with games such as Hotel Mario and a slew of Zelda games whose cutscenes have gone down in gaming history for being so awful.
Only Link can defeat Ganon. Great! I'll grab my stuff!
Suffice to say, Philips didn't make another attempt at gaming after the CDI. Ken Kutagari went on to be the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment and was also instrumental in the development of the PS2, PS3, and PSP. Currently, he is the CEO of Cyber AI Entertainment and has served on the board of several corporations since. In a sad end to this tale though, Terry Diebold passed away at the end of 2020. This was revealed by the YouTuber Adam Korolak, who had made several videos about the prototype and was a friend of Terry's. The fact he let so many people play and even hold the console showed how genuine he was. He had lucked out on the discovery of this thing and wanted to share it with as many people as possible. It sounds like a better person couldn't have found it. After such a detailed story, it makes you wonder what happened to the other 200 odd prototypes. The official line is that they were scrapped after the deal went sour, but it makes you wonder if another will turn up someday. But that's currently where this story ends. All sources, including the videos used, can be found linked in the description. Also, if you have any ideas for future episodes, please let me know. Just check the playlist first, as I've released quite a few of these over the years. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.